Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Pivoted Success Podcast Series, hosted by our friend Sean Cochran from TCC Canada and myself, Jared Goldsmith from ESACS. We're very pleased today to be welcoming Sueling Ching, the Executive Director of the Ottawa Board of Trade. Sueling, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jared. Hello, Sean.
Hi.
So Sueling, many of us from Ottawa are very familiar with the Ottawa Board of Trade and some of the great work it does, but perhaps you could give us a bit of a background on what the Ottawa Board of Trade is all about.
Certainly. So the Ottawa Board of Trade, Boards of Trade and Chambers of Commerce are titles that can be used interchangeably. And across the world and for some time, they have been the primary business association in the municipality in which they serve. So in Ottawa, the Chamber of Commerce was established over 160 years ago. And so we have a deep history of being an economic influencer and a key voice for business. Most recently, we have amalgamated this Chambers of Commerce that were in play before the amalgamation of the municipality to create the new Ottawa Board of Trade. So in some ways, we're a bit of a startup, Jared. So our mission is to create community prosperity through advocacy, economic development, and leadership. And what that means on a day-to-day basis is that we have many benefits and programs that help businesses scale, that we work with our economic stakeholders and politicians on program and policy recommendations that create a competitive business environment in Ottawa, and that we promote Ottawa as the best place to live, work, play, and invest.
You know, that's an interesting anecdote, Sueling, treating OBOT as a startup. I mean, all startups have pros and cons, but there's such an incredible amount of resources and knowledge available because it's a member-driven organization, board, and all the many different committees you have. So, Sueling, let's talk a little bit about, let's put your personal hat on.
Okay.
How were you personally affected by COVID when all this started?
Well, Jared, I think you know because you are one of those active volunteers. And so you and I see each other fairly regularly. And the day that they declared the global pandemic was actually the day that I was named the new President and CEO of the Board of Trade. So it was a little bit of a trial by fire when we got started. But I have a long history in my career for working in community development organizations. And I had been part of the consolidation process with the Chambers of Commerce. So I was excited to get started. And then, of course, when COVID happened, we really had to change quickly to make sure that we were serving our business community adequately. So I was a bit new to the job, but not new to the concept of the chamber. And I have as you know, a beautiful 9-year-old daughter. And so she came home the same week that we all went home to remote work. And so I also became a homeschool teacher at approximately the same time. So that was an interesting thing at play. So it was a very busy time, and many of our volunteers really stepped up to the plate, meeting weekly or bi-weekly, a lot of meetings with local politicians and stakeholders to try and serve the business community as much as possible.
Right. I remember that day very well because I think it was the day before you were our guest speaker at one of our exclusive events. And I remember I brought hand sanitizer to the event because we started hearing about COVID, and it was so awkward. Do we hug? Do we kiss? Do we stand?
I know.
And then, the next day at the mayor's breakfast, everything just, and here we are. So,
yep.
So Sean, maybe you'd like to ask you the next question.
I was just going to say, Sueling, it's great to hear with the amalgamation and all that sort of stuff. I can't imagine how much work that was to coordinate all of the different groups and pull that together. How thankful were you that actually finalized before COVID?
Well, Sean, when I was with the West Ottawa Board of Trade when we first started talking about doing the consolidation. And part of the reason that we were able to convince the membership, and you were part of that as well, is that that was a good idea, was because we said, Ottawa is in a unique position with all of the government that we have here. But that the world is changing quickly with the globalization, with technology and communications, and the pace of innovation. that what has worked for us well in the past might not work for us in the future, and that our business community desperately needed a strong voice of business. So that was pre-COVID. So then when the pandemic hit, it was like, I've always said, you better hope that nothing really serious happens and that you don't have a strong voice of business in your community. So it was a bit of a just-in-time play. So I'm happy that we did have a strong organization, at the ready. No one could have predicted that was going to happen, or really how the last year was going to play out. So really, we've just been able to rely on our members and our volunteers and our relationships with stakeholders and politicians to help us move, be nimble, and evolve as we look at all of these programs and figure out the best way to move together forward.
Well, as I like to say in the music industry, and my favorite singer, Krista Berg, came out with an album called Timing is Everything. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine the fragmented voice of all of the chambers if COVID happened at that time? Right. I mean, speaking as one voice, as OBOT is speaking as the voice of business for the city, mm-hmm. I can't even imagine. I don't even want to go down that road. What could have happened?
I know.
Yeah.
So being handed the reins for what I would say is the worst year on record, at least in all of our lifetimes, mm-hmm. how did you manage to sort of sway things and pivot, so to speak, mm-hmm. With the Ottawa Board of Trade? Because, I mean, that's a very big sort of ship to sort of sway one way or the other in good times, but in mm-hmm. a pandemic and just an absolute nightmare of a time. What was it that you guys sort of did from the get-go that really helped position you as we see today?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So from a very practical point of view, we had to do a lot of the same things that all of the businesses had to do. We had to start thinking about remote working, how we support a remote team, how we realign our workforce with the work that was in front of us, digitization, online marketing, virtual meetings, all of those things. So we worked through those processes, very similar to many businesses. And like many businesses, there were government programs to help us do that. And we did take advantage of some of them. So we worked closely with the Toronto Board of Trade, for example, to roll out the Recovery Activation Program, which helped businesses digitally transform end to end. So we went through that ourselves as well. We worked with Invest Ottawa and the Digital Main Street program to help businesses become adept at marketing online. We used that program as well. So we used a lot of the programs that businesses were offered in order to try and become resilient during this time. But Sean, from a strategic point of view, the ironic thing is that we aligned our organization so that we could have a greater impact in terms of advocacy, policy, and decision making. And in some ways, this whole pandemic accelerated that agenda. Because frankly, from day one, we were, contacting and getting calls from decision makers and politicians so that they could understand what our business community needed. So in a way, it really accelerated that role for us. And now we're at the point where we are looking at continuing that level of collaboration and communication as we plan for a rebound.
Well, that's one of the things I love about some of the stories coming out of this is the acceleration that people have seen, especially from government bodies and things like that to try and help, but just the collaboration. And I hope greatly that that's the sort of stuff that we glean from this disaster, is that we're all much stronger together than we are individually.
I 100% agree, Sean. And then the other thing that we talk about now too is the fact that what we will never be able to dispute again is that health, like public health and safety, mental well-being, and economic prosperity are all part of the same conversation. And whether you're a small business, a large business, a community organization, we're all connected. There's no denying that. And what this last year has revealed is that there are a lot of faults in our current systems, both in our businesses and our governments and our community organizations, that really revealed themselves during this time. And so we do have an opportunity to, and I don't know this cliche, build back better. We have an opportunity to do that now. And during the last year, I mean, I echo your feelings. There have been terrible stories of challenge for many people, many businesses, but there have been also inspiring stories of people helping each other, of businesses who have, become highly resilient and have done innovative and creative things. And we will see lots of new opportunities coming out of this as well.
Right. Actually, I was encouraged, Sean, you even mentioned we are stronger together. Sueling, isn't that one of the little hashtags that
Yes.
OBOT uses?
Yeah, we started using that right from the beginning. And to be honest, like our organization was built on the foundation of collaboration. And Jared knows just, from the very beginning that I came to Ottawa, that's one of the things that I said. And one of the first things that I heard from the mayor when I came to Ottawa about the importance of collaboration. And so this last year has really been an exercise in validating that.
Absolutely. Hey, so let's talk about the many committees that Ottawa Board of Trade has. How have they adapted how each committee works during COVID?
Yeah. So thanks, Jared. As you probably know, one of the greatest resources of our organization, the reason why we are able to impact change is because our members don't just support us by becoming members, but also by being active members, and many of them through volunteer committees. So we have several committees that are aligned with our priorities and our strategic objectives. Ones like transportation, infrastructure, the environment and sustainability, talent development. Those are all various committees. And then we have several councils, including the SME Council. We have a CEO Council, a Council for Diversity and Inclusion. And it's through those councils and committees that our members can really contribute not only their energy and their time and their expertise, but their networks as well to help us move those agendas forward. So immediately when COVID hit, our SME Council, so they typically all meet once a month. Our SME Council started meeting weekly. Our Board of Directors started meeting weekly. Our talent committee, our CEO council were meeting weekly and then bi-weekly. And then I think near the end of the year, a lot of us were saying, oh, maybe we can start moving back to monthly, but then no, we went back. And so those committees are typically very focused on strategic initiatives, long-term initiatives. And through the past year, though, we also use them as sounding boards for emerging issues, to provide feedback on programs that the government was rolling out. And so we were really able to use those roundtables to help us advocate for the business community.
You touched on something quite interesting, Sueling. I used to have discussions quite often with members or potential members. Great, I signed up for OBOT. I'm not getting any gigs. I'm not getting much work out of it. I said, well, okay, what committees are you sitting on? Well, nothing. I don't see you at any events. Oh, I don't have time. Well, it's a matter of, like you said, engagement. You have to put the time in to develop those relationships. It doesn't matter what organization you're part of, but the more you give, the more you get.
Well, yes. And I mean, both of you know, because you're so integrated in the business community, creating relationships, building your network, it's a long game. and then eventually your business does prosper, but it's one of the benefits of being part of the organization is that you have an opportunity to meet new people and work with them at a different level. There's no question about that. But everybody's different, and the organization is so diverse. Everybody can decide how they want to do it. But the number one thing is that you're supporting a strong voice of business they'll be there for the long term.
Right, and I know one of the outgoing initiatives during COVID was you created peer groups. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was a great resource to help other businesses learn to adapt and thrive during COVID.
Sure. So this is one of the ideas that came out of our SME Council, is that business people would like an opportunity to brainstorm or problem solve with their peers. And so we set up a group of business people, different groups actually, and I think we based them on whatever the issue was that they were trying to tackle. So it was a sort of a short-term group. You would have a few weeks to work with the same group, and I think they built some camaraderie did some information sharing, and it was very well received.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine the transition from the amount of events that you would have normally done in person to switch that to sort of a virtual. How was that experience to flip that over? And have you seen maybe more attendance because people can get there virtually instead of having to drive down to a specific location?
Yeah, so we run anywhere from 25 to 30 events a year. Anything from a casual networking event to, we also host the Best Ottawa Business Awards once a year, where we would typically have a gala of 700 or 800 people. And so we really had to change that agenda quickly. And Jared, you mentioned the ESACS event that I was at it was the night they declared the pandemic, because I was driving home from your event when I heard it. And we were hosting a mayor's breakfast at City Hall the very next morning. And, we have been discussing, how will it go? What will we do moving forward from here? And we got to City Hall at 6:30 the next morning, and we had 170 people registered and 60 showed up. So I said, I think the market is going to decide how we move forward here. And so we did have to cancel our event. So the very next one that was typically scheduled was the 40 Under 40 Gala. Again, highly, sought after event ticket. And so we turned that one into a TV broadcast, and we just, we went ahead with the awards portion, and we recognized all the recipients, but we did it through a broadcast. And then in the summer, we were able to host a smaller version of our annual golf tournament, which is typically extremely popular. We had to cut that in half in order to meet the protocols, but we did that. And then the Bob's, the Best Ottawa Business Awards, we did another broadcast as well. So then we started out with the Mayor's Breakfast virtually. And what we have found with all of the events that we've been doing virtually is that there's a far greater reach, if you will. So we do have lots of people still attending, virtually, but what we've found is that we're able then to share the recordings, and the views of the recordings is a far greater audience than we would ever reach in person. And why we like that is because then the message can be shared in a much broader way.
Right. I remember that.
Sorry, Jared. I was just going to say, I just love the partnership with Rogers and bringing that together to pivot and quickly sort of be able to put something out like that. Because especially for big events like the 40 Under 40, I mean, that's such a shame for those people that are being honored in that sort of scenario to not get the big gala, but better yet, they're on TV now. So, I mean, what a great experience and a change to whatever you can sort of make work at the time.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioning Rogers, because they have been fantastic to support us. And when you talk about, what do you have to do to pivot? I mean, obviously, we are not production specialists, that's not our game, right? But to have an organization jump in like that and allow us to offer this service in such a professional way, we were very grateful.
Absolutely. I remember that Mayor's Breakfast very well. One, because it was the first day that you came on board. Two, I've never seen so much leftover bacon. I was in heaven. Unfortunately, yeah. So like, what are you most excited about, let's say, in the next 6 months? And also, what are you excited about for the Ottawa Board of Trade? So
what am I excited about? You mean personally?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm really excited about the opportunities that all of us have had to sort of reevaluate, right, what's important in our lives. And I know a lot of people are probably spending more time with their husbands and their kids than they ever anticipated. And there have been a lot of learnings about what we need to be doing personally to take care of ourselves, to be healthy, to focus in on what's most important to us. And so I've definitely had the opportunity, or rather the impetus, to do that. And I'm excited about the Board of Trade. We're embarking on our, during COVID, we also had our first AGM virtually, and we elected our first official board of directors for the organization since it's turned into the Ottawa Board of Trade. And we've got some fantastic volunteers on both on the board and our committees involved with our organization. So we're getting ready to reveal our new strategic plan for the organization. As I say, we've built many great relationships with stakeholders, and we're just excited about creating a really solid rebound plan for Ottawa that takes advantage of innovation, globalization, communications, and be really future thinking and city building.
What about the future, Sueling? People talk about hybrid events. Mm-hmm. Even the larger events or even the smaller, one-off events that they're, when available, we'll be able to do in person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think there will still be a virtual need, keeping in mind that you just mentioned earlier that right now there seems to be a greater reach because Sean also mentioned you don't have to travel. There's no barrier. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a possibility. I mean, there are so many emerging trends happening right now. Who knows what's going to stick or not? I do know many people say, and I myself, I mean, I miss seeing you guys in person, right? And shaking your hand and having a cup of coffee together. And I think people will be very anxious for that personal contact. Having said that, now that we're all media specialists, certainly I think that the digital communications and the virtual events will have some part to play. It's going to be hard to justify, travel costs for meetings and things like that, the time that you're investing in traveling for meetings. And it's going to be hard to justify that. And so I think there will be a hybrid approach. There's no question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't see myself. I live out in the east end of Ottawa. If somebody says, hey, let's have a meeting in Canada, if it's you, Sean, absolutely. But if somebody else, I don't know, it's much more convenient just to go from meeting to meeting, much more efficient.
Mm-hmm. I can't, right now, or not right now, for the last year, right? We're on a Zoom meeting, from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. I mean, you barely have time to get a glass of water. But I remember being in meetings and driving around looking for parking I would leave myself a half an hour or 45 minutes to try and get to a meeting, even if it was close by, because I had to look for parking and all that kind of stuff. But having said that, it's pretty hard to duplicate, the relationships if you're never seeing people in person. And to be honest, that sense of connection is important to our mental well-being and to our health as well. So I'm pretty sure back-to-back Zoom meetings will not be all the craze forever.
not forever, but, talk about efficiencies. When I would go to an OBOT event, let's say at early evening, I avoid traffic. So the entire event would take me 4 or 5 hours. That's why I'm always early at event Sueling.
Yes.
Good parking, you meet people right away and there's no traffic.
And you can help Sueling pull in all her stuff.
Yeah, obviously that's an added benefit. But I asked this question to other guests about the efficiency. I even mentioned it to the mayor the other day on one of our podcasts about, are you noticing an increase in efficiency throughout the city? Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So just from the Ottawa Board of Trade's perspective, going forward with future events, hybrid needs. Yeah, it's not going away. I think it's going to be part of our toolkit in some way. Yeah,
I think so too. But I'm always careful not to confuse efficiency with effectiveness. And so I think there's a balancing act, right? Because you can be highly efficient, but then not necessarily, meeting your desired outcomes either.
Yeah. And I find, especially in bigger settings, when you're doing sort of group roundtables, it's easier to be in person because you feel more comfortable being able to interrupt each other and that sort of stuff. Whereas I find on the Zoom style calls, a lot of the time, you're more resistant to say anything and just sort of sit back and be like, well, we'll talk about it later maybe, or something like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you can be distracted too when you're on Zoom calls and things. And so it's hard to duplicate that person to person.
Yeah, I love the idea of a future of hybrid events because I like the idea of being able to extend it to people that might be too far out of town or don't have the time to commute, but still give you that option to come in and actually physically get together with people. Because, I mean, I think more than that, everybody can admit that that's the biggest thing missing in our lives right now is interaction from a social perspective, a family perspective, or even a business perspective. Just being able to connect with people and be in the same room as people, I mean, it's something that we as humans desperately need.
I agree. And sometimes it's the nature of the work. Like, I'll just give you an example. We had a meeting earlier today talking about tax rates. Well, I don't really need to be in the room with you to be talking about tax rates. But if we want to talk about, the future of the city or new initiatives, and we want it to be brainstorming and interactive, then maybe I prefer to be with you in a room.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. One of my favorite expressions was something to the effect that we, like you mentioned, Sueling, collaborate. And reaching out, like from the OBOT's perspective, Ottawa Board of Trade's perspective, the other stakeholders, and speaking as one voice, like, we're going to be wrapping up shortly, but what about words of wisdom, let's say on the value of collaboration? Because so many people, I think, in business over the years, they try to silo. Everybody else's competition. I have to be really careful. And I mean, any thoughts about like wisdom and collaboration?
So I'm a big fan because you and I get to talk about this a lot. We have really good relationships with the other stakeholders in Ottawa, and we don't feel competitive at all because the truth is all of us have our own mandates, but we're all working toward one goal, and that's the prosperity for our community, right? And serving our businesses and the health of our community. And so resources are limited. It doesn't matter if you're a business or a city or a community. And the more that you can synergize, right, instead of duplicating efforts and wasting resources, you have the opportunity to create new things and to grow exponentially together. And so I believe that if we work together, we create a bigger pie, if you will, right? And everybody's more successful, and then we're able to better serve the community that we're working in.
Well, that's one thing I've noticed. I mean, I'm sure we all have, is the collaborations between different industries, different sectors of government, and all that sort of stuff for the pandemic. And of course, during a time of panic, I mean, people are a little bit more willing to take that leap of faith and sort of contribute because they're really trying to help one another. But that's one of the big takeaways I really hope for us as a society in general that we can take away from all of this, is that we are all just regular people and we all need help one day or another. And the more we can come together and the more that we can work together, the more we all glean from it at the end.
But we're even, Sean, I mean, you're probably seeing it even as much as or more than I am. I mean, we're seeing that trend in business as well, where you're starting to see fractional, executives so that small businesses can have access to that same level of expertise, businesses that outsource things that aren't, that aren't core to their own business and that kind of idea. So I think it is a new way of working for sure. And I think digitization and virtual meetings, I mean, they allow for that even more. There's some people who don't even have to be in the same city anymore to work, or maybe you have access to expertise from somewhere else outside your city.
Well, it's great to have access to these tools like Zoom that are relatively straightforward. And I think pre-pandemic, there'd be a lot of people that were not comfortable with that sort of idea, who now are like, oh, it's nothing. I do it with my family. I do it with my boss. I do it with whatever. And that's no problem. So it's great, the sort of forced technological upgrade everybody sort of had to have with how to sort of get their way through these different sorts of platforms now.
Well, and pre-pandemic, I remember having conversations with our friends at Invest Ottawa that, Ottawa-based businesses did have room to grow in terms of being digitally savvy. And I know I'm not the first to say it, but as a community, as a business community, we've grown 10 years or accelerated 10 years in this last year. And so that's one of the other benefits of what's gone on this last year.
What about, the whole technological aspect? Yeah, the whole world has adapted 10 years in the space of a year or less. Like it or not, this is the reality now. And, for small business, Sueling, I'm sure you and I, all of us, maybe those even listening, know people, or you might be one yourself, that oh, the government's going to bail me out. I'm going to cry under my pillow every night, versus those who, well, all right, I have to do something about it, and I have to change how I do business. It's adapting and doing something to it. Like, I'm glad you brought up the concept of the mental health. I mean, that's such a huge component. And how is the Ottawa Board of Trade helping entrepreneurs with the mental health capacity?
Well, we have been working with our members to try and understand the situation and advocating to the government to provide more resources in this way. So we are looking at new opportunities to partner with Ottawa Public Health and Royal Ottawa. And this is something actually that we had identified pre-pandemic as important. So we actually have brought Royal Ottawa in before to do keynotes to talk about, there's absenteeism, but then they talked about the presentism, like when you actually physically go to work, but you're not really there, and the impact of mental well-being on productivity and creativity. And so we had identified it before as a key aspect of our economy, but it's become so much more now. And so it's not something that I think any of us will be allowed to ignore moving forward. And we'll continue to work with stakeholders who are experts in that field to try and support our business community.
It's interesting you use the word presenteeism. I might start using that. That's a great word, because I've recently joined the Kiwanis Club of Ottawa.
Okay.
And on their meetings, if somebody is obviously on their phone, they're dinged $10.
Oh no, they don't like that.
and they call them, okay, so-and-so, oh, you're on your phone, so you have to pay our treasurer $10 to go towards a benevolent fund or something like that. Mm-hmm. So they get called out, and you have to pay attention.
So Royal Ottawa, I got that from Royal Ottawa. I didn't just make it up. And they have stats around what that can cost a business. So, I mean, if someone's not at work, you can track that pretty easily. But if they actually are showing up, but they're not productive, and I think from a business perspective, it's a partnership between the employee and the business culture. And so making sure that we are providing workplaces and cultures that are supportive of physical and mental well-being in order to get the highest productivity and an impact from the work that they do.
That's great. So Sueling, well, Sean, do you have any final questions for her?
No, that's great, Sueling. Thanks so much for joining us. And I love the discussion about mental health and all that sort of stuff, because it was, obviously identified before you were mentioning by the Ottawa Board, because it is a concern, especially for entrepreneurs and that sort of stuff. But with the pandemic, everybody got so focused on just sort of surviving. So a lot of that sort of stuff fell by the wayside a little bit. And people weren't necessarily realizing the devastating effect that this is having for so many from a mental health perspective. So I think now it's shone a real light onto it, that it's not just right now, it's all the time. And it's a really important factor that everybody needs to factor in, whether it be small business, government, or whatever. But something that I hope everybody gets to take a bit more seriously as we get on the other side of this.
I agree with you, Sean.
Right. So thank you so much, Sueling. How can somebody get in touch with you?
So I'm at the Ottawa Board of Trade all day, every day. And so my email is sueling.ching@ottawabot.ca. Yes. And all that information's on our website. So thank you, Jared. And thank you, Sean, for hosting this podcast and keeping the conversation going. And it was a real honor to be invited to join you.
Well, thank you very much, Sueling. So yeah, on behalf of Sean Cochran from TCC Canada, myself, Jared Goldsmith from ESACS, I want to thank our special guest, Sueling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, for joining us on another episode of the Pivoted Success Podcast. Stay well, everybody, and stay in business. Thank you.